I'll be giving why is Linux Mint the best Linux distribution for Linux beginners. Um, Linux Mint is simply one of the easiest Linux distribution to switch to if you're a long-time Microsoft Windows user. So, what are the reasons why choose Linux Mint? Um, okay, so let's go through some of it. First, let me just have a short background of what is Linux Mint. So, Linux Mint is a community-managed distribution still based on Ubuntu that aims to be smart, simple, and easy OS that can be both robust as well as straightforward. Linux Mint can also provide a creative multimedia guide by adding some software such as codecs bundled with a mixture of free and open source applications. Currently, there are three editions of Linux Mint, namely Cinnamon, Mate, and Xfce. Cinnamon by far is the most popular of the three. Cinnamon is developed for and by Linux Mint. It is beautiful and feature-rich. The current version of Cinnamon is codenamed Una, which is used in Linux Mint 20.3. Linux Mint is also involved in the development of Mate. This is a classic desktop environment which is a continuation of GNOME 2. It was the default desktop environment of Linux Mint from 2006 to 2011. It is a bit slower than Cinnamon, since Mate runs faster and uses fewer resources and is more stable. Xfce is another uh, flavor of Linux Mint. It is a lightweight, although it doesn't support as many features compared to Cinnamon and Mate, but stability-wise, it is very stable and light on the resource usage. Now, what you currently see on my desktop is the Cinnamon version of Linux Mint. Now, let's go through some of the reasons why Linux Mint is the best distribution if you want to shift from Windows to Linux. Number one, Linux Mint interface feels very familiar. Its interface doesn't make you a stranger. Majority of us is familiar with Windows or a Chromebook, so shifting to Linux Mint won't be that hard for us. Very much like Windows, Linux Mint start button is also located at the lower left portion of the desktop. Very much is similar with Windows. Users can also do a right click on the desktop and a menu will appear. Again, very much like Windows. So let's say for example, I'm going to right click on my desktop. So this particular menu will appear. Low memory usage compared to GNOME. Linux Mint gets rid of all the unnecessary applications aiming to make it faster. The developers of Linux Mint were able to accomplish this by using Cinnamon instead of GNOME. Okay, so let's try to check. Open terminal. If installed htop. Okay, sudo apt. Let's try to check its memory usage. Software Manager, unlike Ubuntu, which takes ages to load and heavily eats up resources. Um, Linux Mint Software Manager is lighter and loads a lot faster. So let's say I'm going to click here, then we have here Software Manager. So it's a lot faster when it comes to loading compared to the one in Ubuntu. So this is actually the software manager of Linux Mint. So as you've noticed, you can um, install it directly on the software manager without using the terminal. So let's try to run, but in my case, I am going to show you htop. So this is actually the memory usage. So 877 MB out of 3.84 gigs. So it doesn't consume that much memory as you've noticed. Okay, let me just try to clear it up a bit so that it will be clearer to you guys. So this one, it only consumes 800 uh, less than 900 MB uh, out of 3.8 gig of memory. So that's how much memory it only consumes. So it's actually quite uh, low on memory consumption since it uses cinnamon rather than gnome. Okay, let me close. Another, okay, cancel, control C. Okay, let me just try to exit. Now, another reason why why I would recommend Linux Mint is that it comes with pre-installed application. After installation, Linux Mint comes with Firefox. Okay, so we have here Firefox already. So starting Firefox web browser and LibreOffice, just to name a few. Okay, so let's try to check start. Then we have here the different applications. Let's try to select all applications. So we have here accessories, graphics, internet, and office. Okay, so uh, these are not these are applications that is not installed separately. These applications actually comes when installing Linux Mint. If there's still a need for this application, there's if there's a need for this application to download, uh, compared to Windows, by the way, there wherein you need to install it separately or purchase it separately, then try to install it separately. In Linux Mint, everything is incorporated as a part of the package. So there's no need for us to pay or download it separately. So these are some of the applications that is already packaged along with Linux Mint. So like for example, as what I've said, we have your calendar, library, LibreOffice, LibreOffice Base. So I think this one is actually a new feature or new application in LibreOffice. I don't know when this came out, but I think this is actually comparable to MS Access. Okay, so Calc is an alternative of Microsoft Excel and so on. So for programming, we have your Emacs for GUI and Emacs for terminal. Of course, you also have sound and video, system tools, administration preferences. For graphics, we can also do some document scanning, drawing, and pics. Okay. Now, if you want to download certain applications or applications that is not or that didn't come pre-installed with Linux Mint, you can actually go to the software manager, then try to look for that particular application. Okay, so there's also tons of application that we can just download for free. So that's one of the beauty also of Linux Mint. Um, Next reason is it doesn't require that much hardware or powerful. It doesn't require that much power when it comes to hardware. Now, one of the reasons why people shift from Windows to Linux is that the newer version of Windows tend to require more resources than aging PC can provide, especially right now with the coming of Windows 11. Okay, so if you wanted to shift to Windows 11, let's say for example you're coming from Windows 7 and you wanted to shift to Windows 11, there's a need for you to upgrade your hardware um, because it will not run if on older hardware. Linux Mint, which much like other Linux OS, tends to demand less when it comes to hardware resources. With Linux Mint, an old PC will do just fine. Linux Mint will give the users the latest versions of web browsers, office tools, and multimedia programs, as well as other open source games or applications. Next is next reason is elegant and modern design. So the developers of Linux Mint went the extra mile to keep things modern with nice icons. So let me just try to show you. So let's say for example you wanted to change the icon. Maybe let's go to we can right click on the desktop, then customize. Okay. So okay, let me just try to change start. Then you have here control center. Okay, so we can also change the themes. Um, so desktop mouse, pointers, icons. So these are the different colors that we can use to change our the colors of our icon. So let's say, for example, you wanted to change it to blue. Okay, so change to blue. You can also change the mouse pointer, the window borders, even the desktop. So we can change actually how the desktop will look. Okay, so if you're kind of like want to use the color teal, you just have to do click mint e teal. Okay, and everything will just change. Okay, so they didn't just stop at making the distro simple and just left it looking like a GUI decades before. So one of the reasons also that I would rather use Linux Mint over other Linux distribution is that although currently there's a lot of Linux distribution which is actually quite beautiful already, such as Elementary OS and uh, Zorin OS, but um, um, why stick with Linux Mint? Because of its simplicity, of course, and other than its simplicity, it's also quite elegant. Okay, so they took a lot of time trying to figure out um, how to make the users comfortable in using this particular operating system. So we can also change the icons, settings, and remove themes, and so on. Okay, so let's just try to close. Okay, so we can customize it also based on our own preference. Um, Another reason is can be easily installed. Okay, so one of the reasons also that I would recommend Linux Mint for new users such as myself is that its installation isn't that complicated. Okay, one of the main objectives of Linux Mint is to make the installation as hassle-free as much as possible. Again, if you're familiar in installing Windows, it won't be that hard for you to download and install Linux Mint. So basically what you need to do is you just need to download the ISO file, then try to put it on a USB drive, try to create a bootable USB drive, try to put it in your hardware or in your laptop or computer, then you can install it directly. Okay, there's no need for you to use the terminal. All you have to do is just use the GUI installation. Okay, then that's it. Just have to click. Just try to read and just uh, you can proceed with the installation, which is actually quite hassle free when it comes to installation. Um, it doesn't just come with that particular type of installation doesn't just come with Linux Mint. It also comes with other Linux distributions such as Ubuntu. Okay, but let's just try to focus on Linux Mint for the meantime. Um, Conventional and advanced applications. Now, more people are computing from mobile devices. Many versions of Linux are striving to reinvent the wheel, producing interfaces on touch screens or decrease the number of options displayed at one time. Okay, so when we talk about conventional and advanced apps, is they a lot of Linux wanted to shift uh, or wanted to consider also mobile devices. That's why they try to limit a lot of options, a lot of information that is being displayed on screen one at a time. So unlike Linux Mint's developers, see little demand for that kind of alteration. So Linux Mint basically just tried to focus on a standard interface, which is desktop or laptop. That's where their focus is. So uh, actually, there's one distribution that I will also be showing you later and also be doing a bit of review. Is Makolo Linux, um, Makolo Droid. So it's a combination of Linux and at the same time also Android. I'll be showing it to you also later. I'll be putting a link um, once I am done reviewing that particular Linux distribution. So they try to focus their direction by the basically is to combine Linux and at the same time also Android. Okay. Um, Another one is long-term support, because that's also one of the reasons why people uh, shift to Linux Mint. It's long-term support. The current version of Linux Mint, which is Una, is based on Ubuntu 20.04, codenamed Focal Fossa. Okay. This has Ubuntu's LTS, which is up until April 2025. This means that the Ubuntu will only cease its support for this particular version up until April 2025. This is also an advantage for Linux Mint since no major upgrade is done. Major upgrades tend to have some issues at time. Okay, so let's try to check what version we have here. Okay, open terminal. I don't think I have installed NeoFetch yet, so let's just try forget about it. Okay. Uh, this particular version of Linux Mint actually, so as you notice, my system is up to date. So, uh, and also this one runs in Ubuntu 20.04. So it's Focal Fossa. Okay. So there's no need for so long-term support basically means that we don't need to upgrade, or there's no major upgrade up until April 2025. So it's safe for us to use this particular Linux version or Linux Mint version up until April 2025. Now, why is it that we have also to consider LTS support? Because we have what we call a software maturity. So on any part once a software is released, basically there's still some issues that might arise along the way. Of course, developers would be fixing it, but when you talk about long-term support, it has a much more longer uh, time to mature. Okay, uh, so along that with that particular version, it matures. It will become more stable and up until April 2025. So basically, all of the bug fixing, all of the issues uh, that might arise will be fixed up until April 2025. Minor bug fixes, minor issues up until April 2025. Okay, so they have a much the life of the software actually is much longer compared to uh, software or operate or distribution that is not long-term support or that doesn't have an LTS on it. So um, it also comes or it also includes Linux Mint also includes everything from Linux. So since it is Ubuntu based, that means that the vast majority of the code base across this version of Linux. So the code based across this version of Linux. So basically, what it normally does is we have here um, Ubuntu. No, Linux Mint on top of Ubuntu. Okay. Then of course we all know it's Linux, so everything comes with Linux. Software and application that operates on Ubuntu will also work on Mint. So all of the commands, by the way, so let's say for example, um, let me just try to show you. Okay, let me just try to minimize. Let's say for example, one of the main. Okay, let me just try to change this a bit. Now, one of the main reasons, by the way, is that let's say, for example, you're using a terminal. So there's no need for us to learn new commands when using the terminal. So basically, all you have to do is, again, sudo apt get update. So uh, if you're familiar on using Ubuntu, then it won't be that hard for you to adjust in using Linux Mint. Although interface-wise, Ubuntu is quite different compared to Linux Mint, but command-wise, whatever commands we know in Ubuntu will also work on Linux Mint. Okay. So if users wanted to maximize their productivity with different Linux applications but for a much conventional and familiar interface, Linux Mint should be our direction. So let's say for example you wanted to install this particular application which only runs on which can only run on Ubuntu. So since basically Linux Mint is also uh, or it works on top of Ubuntu, then it will still work. Okay, that's one of the beauty also of Linux Mint, because actually when we try to think about it, Ubuntu is quite a popular Linux distribution. So when we try to think about it, Linux Mint also uh, rides along uh, the popularity of Ubuntu. Okay. And last, as what I've mentioned, it is currently one of the most popular Linux distributions. So other than Ubuntu, Linux Mint is also one of the most. If you find the contents of this blog useful or interesting, don't hesitate to hit the subscribe button. And if you wanted to be notified every time a new video is uploaded, don't forget to hit the bell notification button. Thanks.